Here at Behind the Mask, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original storytellers and custodians of the land on which we live and meet today. Behind the Mask is a podcast about sharing authentic stories. And in continuing that legacy of storytelling, we acknowledge that we're honouring and celebrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' traditions, customs and stories. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
Boarded the bus to take my daughter to daycare and then go on to work. There was a little girl directly behind Emmy, who was sort of tugging at her hair and pinching her and flicking at her and all that sort of stuff. And I sort of turned around and said to this girl behind us, "Can you please stop?" And the girl's mother just went off. Commotion caused the bus driver to pull over and tell me that I needed to get off the bus.
One of my mates was driving the car. Little idiots were on the side of the road with a slingshot, just taking shots at cars. And one of those shots got me in the eye. The eye surgeon came that close to actually having to take the eye out, but he didn't. But as a result, it's disabled.
Being told that the colour of my skin was going to hold me back in relationships, that being brown skin is not, a desirable sort of characteristic. That it was going to hold me back professionally.
I'm very shy, introverted. When I was younger, I was cripplingly shy. So
Really?
I've sort of grown out of that shell, thankfully, over the years.
I'm Josh Pitterman. I'm a singer, actor and certified meditation teacher. I've played many roles in my life, both on and off stage, and I've worn many masks. But I've always had a curiosity for what's happening behind those masks, behind identity and the ego. I want to explore the real stories beyond the bright lights of people's journeys and get a VIP pass to the backstage tour of their lives. In this new podcast series, you'll get to know some of the most extraordinary and inspiring people behind the masks that they wear. It's an opportunity for them to share their authentic stories, their successes, sacrifices, hurdles, triumphs, fears, motivations, insecurities, and passions, as well as their self-discoveries, philosophical or spiritual awakenings, the growth mindset tools they've used, and the wisdoms and lessons they've learnt to navigate their way through life with purpose and meaning. It's time to be inspired by the depths of what it means to feel truly human. It's time to go behind the mask. Today, I'm joined by two of Australia's most well-respected and renowned journalists and broadcasters, Jeremy Fernandez and Michael Rowland. Jeremy studied journalism at Curtin University and then went on to study broadcasting at WAPA, Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts. Hopefully a couple of show tunes were thrown in there too.
The dream's always there. It's never happened, but the dream is there.
You're one of the country's most versatile presenters. You've hosted broadcasts of Australia Day Live, New Year's Eve, Sydney Mardi Gras, as well as federal and state elections. You've worked for CNN International, you've worked for the ABC, you've worked for the Seven Network. You've got a fabulous podcast at the moment with one of my favourite people, Julia Baird.
Pottyland, yeah.
Yes, called Not Stupid, which I love. And when you've got a bit of spare time, you present the ABC News Nightly in New South Wales.
7 o'clock news in Sydney.
From Monday to Friday. So you're a busy man.
I like being busy.
Yeah, I can see that. And Michael, you're just as busy. You've had a prolific career that's spanned decades. I want to say that you're my favourite journo, but then I'd be putting Jez to one
Michael's
side.
my favourite journo as well, so I'm with you there.
And that's not just because you're a big Western Bulldogs fan. You've had various roles as business and finance reporter, Victorian state political reporter. You were the ABC's US correspondent for a while.
Yep.
You were the former president of the Melbourne Press Club as well.
I was indeed, for about 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, you love a good pun.
I've been known to love a good pun and a very bad dad joke, yes.
Yeah, and since 2010, you've been the ABC's co-host for their Brekkie television show. And in 2019, I think you took on a more sort of substantial role as a
senior network presenter.
Presenter.
Which figures in with what I do at breakfast, just hosting big events, big news stories in Australia and around the world.
Doing big things. And one of the biggest things you do is you're an ambassador for the Western Bulldogs Community Foundation. Yeah.
Hello, fellow ambassador.
Hello, fellow ambassador.
Yeah, it's a great organisation.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Shall I leave you two to it? Or
Yeah,
I cannot relate to any of this.
all you got to do is just say woof every now and then.
Okay, go on.
We'll get him a blue, white and red
Oh,
jersey.
absolutely.
No, in
We'll
Gayland,
see.
that means something completely different.
Oh, does
Really?
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you're hot, basically.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
great. Lads, welcome to the Behind the Mask podcast. I'm so glad we can be in the one place to make this happen.
Thanks, Josh.
It's wonderful to have you on. I'm going to jump straight in like I do with everyone here. If you were to let go of the identities that come with being a broadcaster, a journalist, a presenter, and all the attachments that come with those things, what remains? Who's behind the mask of Jeremy Fernandez and Michael Rowland?
I am just remarkably simple. I think it's just there's this thing about being on TV and wearing a nice suit and a nice tie and appearing in a nice set and being very articulate with well-crafted, stories and scripts. And then I go home and I'm just a regular guy in his pajamas listening to music. There's sort of a remarkable lack of complexity, I think, about my life that people might be surprised, I think, that I'm actually just very, very simple.
And is that because work as a journo is quite complex? You have to do a diverse range of things and really dig deep on some huge issues that face people and the nation and the world. And then so just getting back to really simple things to sort of find
that's
strike some
right.
balance.
I find actually, I don't know if you're the same, but detaching from the news is really, really important to me.
100%.
So I routinely and regularly tune out so I can just reconnect with the rest of my life, the people in my life, the things I'm interested in, so that I'm not living and breathing it. I'm not one of those people who lives and breathes the news. I love music. I love musical theatre, which is actually how we met, right?
Yep. Everyone who comes on the show loves a musical. If you don't, you're not coming on.
No, that's right, yeah. No, but it's true. And I look for things that, bring joy and peace. I think that is maybe the primary purpose in my life. The thing that, brings me the most direction in my day is the pursuit of joy and peace.
Within all your pursuits or within the world?
Everything in the world, and also being, sort of being able to sort of put it out there as well, becoming a custodian of other people's sense of joy and peace, and particularly when you work in the news and, the world is a bit of a basket case at the best of times. It's important, I think, to bring a bit of light and shade to the day and kind of find the absurdity in the world that we live in sometimes and have a laugh about it.
Yeah. Do you think the world is more of a basket case now than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago?
No.
But it's just perpetually is a basket case.
Yeah, and I think part of the thing is also about just leaning into discomfort and saying, this is normal, this too shall pass. We, kind of overthinking it and thinking that we're living in the worst period in history is not only factually incorrect, it's not helpful to how we continue to live into the future, how we raise our children. So I just try to, not to say that, things are good, and it's certainly not the case for everyone, but I think it's important to be able to put current events into perspective so that we can kind of have the capacity to think about the future and the world we do want to live in.
And that's, I imagine, can be quite hard for journalists or some journalists. One thing I did want to ask you guys about is about journalism integrity at the moment and clickbait media and fear sort of driving what people watch and listen to and read. It's so wonderful to hear that peace and joy and a harmonious world is at the core of your
For me, absolutely.
values.
Yeah, 100%.
When that is that. Do you find that is perpetuated more, those sort of fear-based articles and stuff, more than they have been?
Oh, yeah, 100%. We live in an age of digital media. The ABC is increasingly a digital media outlet as well, but not speaking about the ABC here, but it's very hard to find out factual, straight down the middle information at the moment. That's our mission at ABC News, and we are both proud to be part of that mission. But I would not like to be a teenager at the moment, because I just think the world is a very challenging place, and it's very hard to get facts on anything at the moment that isn't clickbait, that isn't a wild opinion on both sides of the ideological spectrum. It's a wild world out there in terms of misinformation, disinformation, and it's pretty worrying.
There's a lack of disclosure of conflicts of interest and vested interests as well, I think, when you're talking about the news. So I think you're right, but I also do think kids these days are actually so much smarter as digital natives, can decode these things so much more readily than I ever could when I was younger.
Yeah, just sift through the bullshit.
Yeah.
And we can see what's authentic, and we can see what's driven from a place of agenda or someone's clear desire just to distort.
And to manipulate.
And to manipulate.
As long as it's in friendly TikTok 30-second bite-sized chunks, it's okay.
Yeah.
With a dance, Michael.
With a dance and a cat. Michael, you're not avoiding this question. What's behind your mask?
I'm very similar to Jez. I take off the mask, and presenting a national news program involves putting on a mask, I find. Especially a 3-hour rolling news program. Every show is a performance, just like you hop up on stage. It's a performance, and we might talk about that as the podcast goes on. When I happily rip my mask off at the end of each day's show, I just very simple person, just like Jez. I'm very shy. I am fundamentally introverted.
Yeah.
And you need to be an extrovert to...
I did not know that.
No. I've learnt that about you in my stalking of you over the years. Obviously, I said I'm a big fan. Yeah, you are.
I am very shy.
And so why did you choose such a front-facing career? Someone has to be in the camera all the time. Was it a sort of, I'm just going to trial by fire this, I'm going to do hard things?
Bit of that. I spent most of my career as a reporter where you can be fairly anonymous, and sure, you've got to pop up and do live crosses, but only for 3, 4 minute, 5 minute bursts. I guess I grew into the role of being a full-on presenter, certainly since doing this job, taking up this job 14 years ago. But it is still a challenge. My safe space is being a straight news anchor, like Jez does very well as well. Give me a straight news story, and I'm fine. When we, in Paul Keating's famous words, flick the switch to vaudeville, which we do every day on News Breakfast, it's a breakfast TV program, that is not my safe space. I have to really stretch myself to dance the nut bushes as we did. And do not dare put that on your podcast, Josh.
Braden's our wonderful producer here. Braden, please put the nut bush on a clip. Thank you very much.
It wasn't that
it's
bad.
Locked and loaded.
And do the yada stuff with our fabulous foodie guest, Alice, and the like. You name it. I have to lean into that. That is not me, Michael Rowland, as an individual. So I'm very shy, introverted. When I was younger, I was cripplingly shy. So
Really?
I've sort of grown out of that shell, thankfully, over the years. When I go home, I love spending time with my beautiful wife, Nikki. I've got two gorgeous kids, not so much kids anymore, 21 and 19-year-old. I love going to the footy. It's where Josh and I are on a Unity ticket. One of my most joyful experiences on a weekend is going to watch the mighty Western Bulldogs play, or going to watch my son, who plays footy as well, at a suburban level, just sitting at the sidelines, chatting to other parents, going to the huddles at half time and quarter time. Love music as well. Love really awful TV, just as a way of disconnecting from the serious stuff we deal with every week.
Peter Alexander's when you
love
had night,
the
getting into
Jarmies
Netflix,
as Nikki, my wife, reassures me, am I not going out trackies, as in do not leave the house wearing them. I would otherwise.
I always do.
Yeah, and we just love diving into you name crappy TV, and we're there, just as a way of trying to switch off from...
Are you crappy TV as well, Jess?
No, I barely watch TV, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah,
outside?
Right. Barely watch TV.
So
I find I watch TV all day.
Are you putting on music? Or?
It's music and podcasts.
Really?
I've always been like that. When I grew up, TV was really restricted in the home, and so it was music. And, we come from a very musical family as well, so listening to music, playing music was much more of a pastime than TV, and it's just kind of stuck through life. I wanted to add to this idea about being an introvert, because I am very much as well. And one thing people don't really understand about TV, even though you're broadcasting to hundreds of thousands, millions of people, it's actually a really solitary job. I sit in a studio by myself most of the time. It's just me. The cameras are all automated. The auto cue operator is sitting in another room, the director and the producer. And that's it. That's the entire team that puts the news to air each night.
Oh, I would love that.
So
do you find that plays on your mind sometimes? You're the only person in the studio, but or sometimes, in my experience, trying not to think of the hundreds of thousands of people out there.
Do you know what? I forget. And when people say, "Oh, we saw this story on the news," or "We saw you doing that," it actually surprises me to this day. I've been doing this for decades now, and it still surprises me that people were actually watching. Because it feels like such a quiet, solitary job in the corner that, no one's tuning in. And people are, obviously.
But great for an introvert.
Yeah. It's actually the perfect job for an introvert. Yeah. 100%. Being on TV.
I'm actually an introvert as well. And most people go, really? I'm like, yeah, but it's just about where I get my energy from. In a sort of Jungian
But what
way.
about eyeballs actually looking at you, which is the difference?
Thing to be in a remote studio. It's one thing to be in front of a packed theatre.
Well, I was never really that comfortable with it, and I think I got into it a little bit out of, trial by fire, and then got better at the skill and better at the craft of storytelling and interest in it. But it took me a long time to be comfortable about people watching me doing it, But I'll sing for hours at home just because I love singing. And sometimes I enjoy that more than being out on stage.
Wouldn't you love to live next door and just
hear him sing all the time? Because I'm such a perfectionist. I'm constantly there, doing the same phrase over and over again. They're like, "We've heard it 35,000 times. It was fine the first time. It's fine now. Shut up." You talked a little about your upbringing. You're born in Kuala Lumpur.
Yes.
And you moved to Borneo very early.
Yeah, still part of Malaysia, but it's sort of like the equivalent of moving to Tasmania.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like a remote kind of small town.
And then you moved to Australia at age 13.
Yeah.
And so why the shift and how was that shift for you personally? How did you embrace it? Because it's a big move.
And it's a big question too, that whole question of where are you from? It's like, how long have you got?
It's a podcast a long time. It's longer than your podcast.
Ancestrally, my ancestry is Indian. Mm-hmm. My paternal grandparents were born in India. And my Indian ancestry on my mum's side goes back about 4 or 5 generations. So all of them separately emigrated to to Malaysia from India. And they came from families that either couldn't afford education, and so people finished school at the age of, between 13 and 15, that sort of thing. And when we were growing up, particularly my paternal grandparents were really, really forceful about the idea of getting an education, and that was the only way that anyone in the family was going to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And so doing well at school was a primary focus, particularly for my paternal grandparents and my parents. And so before, when they'd see you, my grandparents would say, before they even say, "How are you?" they'd say, "What are your results like?" And I was not a great student. I was a very average student. And then the reason we moved to Australia was because my dad had no opportunity to go to university. That was not within the realm of possibility. So when he was in his 30s, he desperately wanted to go to university. He had worked as a newspaper editor in Malaysia of an English language newspaper, and decided that he wanted to not only go to university, he wanted his children to have the same opportunity. And the only place we could do that was in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. So that was the consideration. My mum and dad decided to pack up and move somewhere. And a university in Perth accepted my dad into university. It could have, I could be sitting here with a Canadian accent, broadcasting out of Vancouver or something. Life could have. It's really one of those sliding doors moments.
Your dad was a journo as well, print media.
Print media,
sports journalist.
News. Yeah, which actually made me swear black and blue that I would not become a journalist because I saw it was a hard job. It was long hours, constant conflict with people. You're only really doing a job as a journalist if you're, making people uncomfortable in a good way. So that's how we ended up in Australia. And the exercise of shifting from Malaysia to Perth academically was a really tough one at the age of 13, the really sensitive years in adolescence, leaving friends behind. I had a funny accent. The curriculum between countries was so vastly different. I never quite caught up. So by the time I got to year 12, I actually almost flunked the whole thing.
Really?
Did so badly at school. Barely got into university, got into the lowest ranking course in the lowest ranking university, and then kind of went from there.
And you just worked ass off to make it happen.
Yep.
And so why journalism when it wasn't like, why did you look at that and go, you know what, I am going to pursue the very thing that I look at and go, no.
Do you know one of the things about journalism is that I enjoyed being with other people and being part of a team. I still really enjoy that. I enjoy my own company very, very much. But I enjoyed belonging to something and the exercise of working in media. My school had a media program and we would work on group projects together. And I loved it because I felt like I belonged to this thing and we had this product to show at the end of it and we could kind of shoot the breeze about whether we did well, you know, how we could do things differently. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. So that's how I kind of fell into it. And then it kind of, I fell into radio and then I fell into TV and I fell into presenting. So much of my career has actually happened by accident.
Yeah, but that's the case with journalism. It's often luck. I mean, clearly based on a tremendous bedrock of talent, but it's just when opportunities come up, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And is connection one of the reasons that you stayed at Michael? Is that part of it? Do you love that engagement with people, even though you're shy and introverted?
Oh, yeah, but I come out of the shy and introverted shell to do the job every day. Yeah, like Jez, I love working in a newsroom. I love working in particular in what is a fairly small team on News Breakfast.
And I've worked with your team before when I've filled in for you.
Yes, you have.
And they're wonderful people. They're solid operators. Everyone knows what they're doing and they have a real sense of looking after each other.
Yeah.
And I must say, going in there, and how many times I've been in there? A few times.
Yep.
You feel that immediately, like everyone gets around you and even people who aren't, going to sit on the couch with you. Nate's always there just giving you love. And
Nate's a pest, let's be honest.
Tony Armstrong's giving you love. Like
dimples.
You feel like there's it's not like that Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. Yeah. It's not the morning show.
No, actually, interesting you raise that. Yes, it is so removed in terms of culture. We are not toxic.
That thing was ferocious. Addictive, but ferocious.
Yeah, some of the mechanical aspects are way too true in terms of the pressure in terms of live TV and all of that. But no, the culture is great. We have really productive, sometimes robust in a good way, discussions before the show every morning, very early in the morning as to what we should do, who we should chase to follow up news stories. We have post-match discussions after the show every day about what worked and what didn't, all in the spirit of collegiality with people respecting each other's views. There's a great culture and I really, really love being part of that, as I have loved being part of the different teams I've worked in at the ABC over the decades I've worked with the ABC, be it overseas, in the Washington office. I worked in Canberra for a while. I started in the Sydney newsroom. There is a great ecosystem in journalism that I've really thrived in, I think, and love being part of.
Can I just add to the Michael Rowland fan club here as well? And there's one thing that Michael's really well known for in the ABC, it's his temperament. Michael can cope with just about anything and keep his head on and keep broadcasting. And there is a certain thing about that environment being kind of self-selecting. If you can't keep your head on under pressure as you do, you probably don't belong in a job like that. And you are so good at it because I've seen you in high-pressure environments.
Well, it's funny you say that, Jez. It's one of the things I want to ask Michael about, which is just how calm you always are. And you manage to just find this ease and in grace in the way you are on air. And in catch-ups, I find that about you. But I want to know what riles you up.
What?
Or where do you go to sort of feel like you have that emotional release? Because you're you still have all the emotions that we have.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm a human being.
Yeah.
I get upset, I get angry, I get overjoyed like the rest of us. But I have to keep a lid on that, doing what I do. Like, for instance, we interview politicians pretty much every day on the ABC, and some of the stuff police say from across the spectrum sometimes irritates the hell out of you. But you can't, as a professional journalist, allow that to get on top of you.
I just grab a pillow and you're like, oh no, help, Dutton! Oh, and you're screaming into the pillow.
You're not too far from the truth there. My best form of decompressing is, and it's important, it's been a key part as to why I've been able to do this job for the last 14 years, is to get out and exercise, be it going for a run, walking the dogs, swimming. I love swimming. I find that is a good way of switching off, but also as you're pounding the pavement, thinking, being grumpy over, said issue, is a way of just getting that out of your system.
Yeah.
So, I'm not the complete kumbaya, always calm person. I'm human. I have roiling emotions, but I do try to keep a fairly firm temperament as much as I can.
You do a great job of it. What moves you? What really, touches or pulls on the heartstrings for you?
Yeah, it's just the shitty stuff we deal with in terms of news stories every day. It's hard to see human suffering, small scale and large scale. As a news anchor, I'm finding that probably harder as the years go on to try to process and keep calm on air. Tragedy involving children really gets to me as a father. I find that really rocks me to the core sometimes. But again, I do my best to play the straight news anchor while inside all of these differing emotions are moving me quite tremendously. So that's the main thing, I guess. But also on a happier sense, I'm moved by watching a great footy game. I love going to musical theatre. I love going to rock concerts. I love going out and just singing along, screaming along to my favourite band. Just stuff like that really moves me as well.
Who's your favourite band?
Well, Midnight Oil is my favourite band, but sadly they've broken up, Peter. So
I love that your favourite band is still highly political.
Yeah. No, I've been a fan of the Oil since way back in the 80s, which dates me horribly. And I was lucky enough to see quite a few of their final round of concerts a couple of years or so ago now. But nothing beats, in my view, watching the Oils perform live. They are one of the best groups ever, and I'd love them to come back together, hopefully at some stage.
Peter, if you're listening, Michael would love you to come back.
Jim.
How can we sleep while the beds are burning, mate? Jez, I want to ask you about what you describe as your own Rosa Parks moment.
Oh, yeah.
Can you discuss what happened on that bus with your daughter?
So the context of this is that, I'd grown up for a long time, both in Malaysia and in Australia. This is not a uniquely Australian problem, racism. And being told that the colour of my skin was going to hold me back in relationships, that being brown skin is not, a desirable sort of characteristic, that it was going to hold me back professionally. So in this particular episode, I had boarded the bus to take my daughter to daycare and then go on to work. And there was an incident where there was Emmy and I had sat down and we were kind of minding our own business, and there was a little girl directly behind Emmy, who was sort of tugging at her hair and pinching her and flicking at her and all that sort of stuff. And I sort of turned around. We sort of tolerated it for a little while, and then I sort of turned around very gently and politely said to this girl behind us, "Can you please stop?" And the girl's mother just went off and accused me of molesting her daughter, and kind of went on this kind of rant and was threatening to be physically violent as well. And I was, I'm looking after a 2-year-old at this point, and so I was sort of feeling quite confronted and not quite sure what to do. Anyway, the commotion caused the bus driver to pull over and tell me that I needed to get off the bus, that I was being the troublemaker, and I refused to move. I just I just thought in that moment, when, and everyone can relate to this, when you kind of just reach a point where you just go, I'm not taking this anymore. This has happened for years and years and years, and I'm being made to apologize for something that I didn't even do, and to move and to step aside to make someone else feel comfortable. I'm done. And I said, I just refused to move. And so there's this stalemate on the bus. And, no one called her to account.
And no one supported you?
No one did, but I think they were also afraid. I don't hold it against them. These people knew what it was all on CCTV as well. So anyway, I got off the bus. I took my daughter, eventually when we reached our stop, I sat in my seat. I refused to move. Took her to daycare, and then I stopped at a park just up the road from the ABC and just burst into tears. And it was just the weight of all of that. Anyway, I went on Twitter and I wrote about it. I just sort of tweeted a few things, but just to put it on the record, because a thing when you experience something like that, I've found it's quite often the case that people don't believe you and they say, oh yeah, you're just being oversensitive, or it didn't really happen like that, or there's two sides to every story or whatever. And I just wanted to sort of put it on the record that this thing happened. And then it blew up into a news story, and I was on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, and I was on The Project and all this sort of stuff. And I just thought, what I didn't want to do was to become the story. It's one of my fundamental things as a journalist is to not become the story. And I've spent the years since kind of semi-regretting drawing attention to myself like that inadvertently, because I didn't want to become the story. What I was trying to say was, this is real, this is happening, and this is happening to this privileged newsreader who has the capacity to speak about it articulately, and there are so many others who are dealing with this sort of level of discrimination and bullying and feeling like they can't say anything. And so I've had really mixed feelings about what happened after that incident. I don't regret not moving on the bus, but I kind of wonder whether I broke one of my own rules about making myself the story inadvertently, but that was the result.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that. Actually, it was quite emotional listening to you recount that. What I want to hark back to is what you said at the start, that your real sole purpose is to create peace and harmony. And I'm not here to sort of psychoanalyze, but I do believe that you voicing that brings that issue to life greater than just you. Yeah. And hopefully moves people more towards peace and harmony.
And it's kind of, the idea is not to say that I deserve better treatment than anyone else, or that I deserve special privilege or anything like that. I just want to sit on a bus quietly and kind of disappear if I can. It's not about asking for special treatment or anything like that. And some people say, believe that if you're kind of, voicing these things, that you're asking for some sort of special treatment or elevation, and it's most certainly not the case. Which is why I wrestle with, the attention that it brings me. But I still believe it was an important thing to express in one way or another.
I'm so glad you did.
Regret it at all, Jez.
Yeah, I think it's...
But you know what I mean about drawing attention to yourself as a journalist, right?
Yeah, like it's the last thing you want to do. It's intrinsically in our beings not to do that. Yeah. But you should not feel any regret at all about that, Jez.
Very proud.
Yeah,
thank you.
Lightening the topic, you guys have come across some amazing people in your studios, and you've got to eyeball and chat to people that everyday people would just dream of, touching in some way. What have been your sort of favourite interviews, favourite people to engage with?
One strikes me up in most recent memory is the Fonz.
The Fonz. Arthur Fonzarelli.
That's so cool.
Again, it's dating me horribly. I grew up as a kid of the 70s and early 80s watching Happy Days, one of my favourite TV programs of all time, and loved the Fonz. He was my alter ego as a young, shy kid, worked that out.
He's also the coach in The Waterboy.
Yes, he
with
is.
Adam Sandler. That's how I got into him. So,
and various other roles in his later life, which he's been awarded for. Anyway, he's written a cracking book, highly recommended. And he was in Australia fairly recently doing the rounds, and we were lucky to get him in the studio. And I was not a professional ABC journalist that morning, I can admit. I was a professional fanboy.
The mask.
The mask was
thrown
off.
away.
And they say never meet your heroes, because often you can be disappointed, and that has been the case. No names, no pack drills for heroes in the past doing this job. But Henry is just such a lovely guy, very generous with his time. Listened to the same questions, the same daggy questions he'd heard thousands of times over the years, but pretended it was the first time he'd heard that question. Endured my very bad and daggy rendition of He even laughed at it. Henry Winkler laughed at my signed my copy of the book, and I was just walking on air for days, if not weeks.
I
after
love that. I love that. Jez?
Gina, I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. I've interviewed probably not the volume of celebrities and things that you have, but I've interviewed lots of well-known people. None of them really stick in my mind.
Really?
Because the people that stick in my mind are the ones who are just everyday folks. There are a couple of people who survived the Black Saturday bushfires who I still think about every week, at least once a week. People who've survived floods, people who've lost their children in terrible circumstances. They are the people who really stick in my mind, and it's because of this, because I think it's taken me years to work this out, but I got into journalism because I have been trying to figure out the secret sauce that makes people get out of bed when they've been through something absolutely awful. And how is it that some people can go through these awful events in life, wake up, and then not only kind of pick themselves up off the floor, but make life better for other people? I want to know, if you could bottle that up, what is it? I haven't found the answer yet, but that's, I think, what I'm searching for.
And are you closer to an answer than you once were?
I think.
What path are you sort of walking towards?
So the thing I've worked out is relatively recently that the idea of resilience is not a destination that you get to and then you're just resilient. Resilience is about constantly fighting off the demons, fighting off circumstance, and just keep going. And some days it's easier than others. But that's what I've observed with people who've been through something awful, because I think it's in a selfish way it helps me figure out all the stuff in my life about what I need to bounce back with and what I need to be grateful for. And so watching those people close up, they're the people that really stick in my mind and whom I think about regularly. When I mentor younger people, younger journalists coming through, I always say to them, when you pick your idols and the people you want to be like, don't pick faraway figures. Don't pick presidents and movie stars and all that kind of thing. Pick people in your life, people that you admire in your life, and you might not admire them completely, but an aspect of them, and work out what it is that makes them so amazing by seeing how they operate, how they work with other people, what their work ethic is like. And that is what helps you become a better person, when you can observe people close to you and kind of take on some of those characteristics rather than imagining characteristics of a faraway person who may or may not be as they appear.
And who was that person for you?
In my life?
Yeah.
So there are aspects of my grandmother. There are aspects of, this is going to sound really weird, Hugh Riminton, who works at Channel 10 now. So Hugh was at CNN when I was at CNN at the same time. So he was anchoring out of Hong Kong. I was one of the producers in London. And always just admired him, from when he used to do the late news to, I think was he on Channel 9?
He was on Channel 9.
He was fantastic.
And then when I finally got to meet him, he's just a really good, generous person. Stan Grant is another one of those. Stan is incredibly supportive of young journalists, a mind like the size of a planet, right? But just one of the most humble and supportive people. And it's taught me about what I need to do to kind of put that energy out in the world as well. People I get to work with, like Julia Baird, whom I'm doing the podcast with now, which is just so great because, you get to see people close up like that. Michael Rowland, seeing Michael work under pressure, particularly at, our election coverage, and just watching how you handle pressure, how you interact with people under pressure, how you overcome situations where your scripting or production is not quite where it needs to be. Stuff like that. Watching your idols close up and seeing how they work is far more valuable, I think. So
I love that, and I love some of those names because they're people that I really
and
revere
they're good
too.
people.
Yeah, they seem like good people.
Yeah.
I would love to have Stan and Julia in this room because often the people who come into this space are people who, I revere, or I wouldn't say idolize, certainly fanboy, but they're people who I just have them so much respect from, and I want to hear about their journeys so that I can become a better person.
But this is the thing; their journeys are not straightforward.
No, never.
And this is the thing. So this idea of imagining that this person's got this great life and this great character and it's all nonsense.
No, I mean the human condition can't be anything but a roller coaster.
That's what makes it so special.
Yeah, I love that. So do you have people, Michael, that you really looked up to?
I'm in the same boat. Can I just say, firstly, I don't think I'm worthy to be in the same universe as the other names you mentioned there, Jez, but I appreciate the and right back at you, mate. I think you're a superstar as well. I have role models in the media as well that I've based my professional life on. Some of the colleagues I work with, David Spears, I've got a lot of respect for him. Mm-hmm. He is exceptional at what he does. Over the years, I've had, and they're not necessarily public faces, mentors within the ABC, and I've been with the ABC for most of my career, producers, sub-editors, who I've learnt a lot of, just simply by watching what they do. I'm a great fan of sporting professionalism, sporting achievements, and this is going to be such a clear plug, but I'm a great fan of Luke Beveridge, the Western Bulldogs coach, Western Bulldogs Football Club coach. He cops it, like a lot of coaches do, especially when the team's not doing well. But
I think he cops it more than most.
And unfairly more than most, I think. He's an exceptional human being. I know for a fact that he has got the respect of every single one of the players in the locker room, and it's hard for a coach to boast that. So people like that who are excellent in their field, not necessarily in the media, that produce results, but importantly get the best out of the people they work with and are in charge of. I really rate those type of people.
Hey guys, segment time. Okay. Love a segment. This is quote of your life. I want a quote from both of you that is meaningful or you've used at various stages to help you through life.
Well, listen, I'll start. It's not so much a quote, it's a lyric from a song. It's from John Lennon's Beautiful Boy. It was a song off, sadly, what was his last album, Double Fantasy in 1980. And it's, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
Right.
I can sing it if you like. Actually, no, I won't sing it. I just think it's great. I'm a great fan of the Beatles and John in particular, and that expression has always stuck with me. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, in that, as I see it, he was talking about you can focus too much on the big picture, too much on what's coming up next week, next month, next year, all these plans left, right and centre in the future, but in doing so, miss living in the present, miss enjoying life, all the joys of life, and there are so many joys of life on a day-by-day basis, while the world passes you by when your eyes are on the horizon. I've always tried to live by that quote. Ask my wife Nikki, and she'll tell you I'm not always successful at trying to be in the present. But I just that has always resonated with me, that lyric and that song, which is beautiful in so many other respects as well.
I love that. And that idea of presence is something that we talk about a lot on this show about ways to nurture presence in life, because that's where everything is happening.
I know, right now, and you can so easily miss it. And it's such a dreadful cliche, but life goes so quickly. And it'd be a shame to miss out on all the day-to-day joys. So that's what I try to do every single day. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but hat tip, John Lennon.
Love it. Jez?
Okay, I'm going to have to read this one.
That's fine.
But there's a bit of a backstory here. So this is a I know. Where's my auto cue? This is a prose poem written by Max Ehrmann, circa 1927. And I'll read a passage of it. Whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labours and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy. So
Beautiful.
Absolutely
this
beautiful.
was written about 1927. In the 70s, for some reason, posters of this prose poem were printed en masse because it was just very popular to have, poems of desiderata, that's what it's called, hanging on your walls. So this poster was outside my bedroom in Malaysia as a child, and I'd walk past it every day and just read it and thought, it's just a jumble of words. I don't know what any of this means. It's basically a manual for life about happiness, about how to handle sadness, about how to, pinpoint your aspirations and how to manage your business affairs. It's a short kind of piece that's about, I think, getting through life and seeking joy. And it's one of those things that it's one of the earliest things I can remember reading, and it never really made sense to me. And the meaning of it has shifted over time, and it takes on a different meaning, I think, as I age and as my daughter gets older and I get more advanced in my career. It means different things at different times, I think. But I've always come back to it as a piece of almost like a manual for life.
I think that's fantastic. And I love that it's sort of asking people to see the world through a soul lens as well, which I think is really important, and that strips away a lot of the other stuff that's just not important.
But it doesn't deny kind of sham and drudgery of life as well. That's real, right?
Yeah.
So.
The other thing I love about your story with it, and maybe we've lost a bit of this, is that our connection to poetry, our connection to quotes that are poetic in nature or deep in meaning, that we have to search from. They don't just present themselves like that one does. Do you think we've lost the art of art in some ways?
I think so. We've lost the art in this fast-paced world, and we all certainly live in the various things we do in a very fast-paced world of taking the time, I guess, to search out poems like that, art on any level, and also and more importantly, taking the time to not just read the poems like the one you just read out, or the section of the one you just read out, Jez, but to actually think about them.
Ponder. Yeah.
Just let it sit with you for minutes, hours. I think that, from my personal perspective, is a casualty of the way life is more generally at the moment compared to what it was maybe in the 20s when the poem was written.
Although no television.
Distractions.
Just to sit with stuff, to ruminate and ponder.
Ruminate's a great word.
You might have a view on this, but I think song is a great carrier of poetry in that way. So, and I think it's a much more sort of palatable thing. And I think, when I think to some of the great songwriters and whom I enjoy, it's a bit like that poem. It has a meaning on first listening, second listening, it takes on a different look, different meaning, and it continues to evolve the more you listen to it. So I think of one Australian songwriter, Gordy, who I just think is just one of the best things going. Writes the most beautiful music, very kind of, for me, just makes me think very deeply.
Yep.
So I think song is a great carrier, and I think the democratization of music production over time has allowed more poets to become musicians. Not to say everything's great, but but I think it's kind of
people
also
who may not have had access to the industry.
Yeah, that's right.
100%.
So I think that's kind of maybe a different.
And certainly where nuance and colours and shades can live in that, because you guys are right in amongst it, but the world is, in my opinion, lacking in that in so many ways, based on how binary people want to be on certain things. You are this or you are that. Certainly politically and culturally a lot. And I just feel like those times of rumination and those pieces of art, whether they're visual or in words or in song, just if you take the time to sit on it, you see the colours between the black and white.
Yep. Yeah, it's all about being in the present and
also,
enjoying stuff like that.
Not everything's for everyone. I think it's okay to, we were having this conversation with some friends about classical music and how some people say, I don't like classical music. It's like, that's about 400 years worth of music. You don't have to like all of it.
That's what I mean, the nuance in it.
Pick the bits you like, the bits that resonate with you. Leave the rest. That's perfectly okay.
There's as studying classical singing, I always moved more towards sort of Mozart and Puccini, and there were other things because they were more evocative for me.
I find Mozart tedious.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, and I hate you for that. You're not allowed to have that opinion. I've got a quote that I want to throw out there for you guys. It's a Muhammad Ali quote, which is, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." And I want to talk about the way in which you guys feel like you provide service to the world beyond your careers, and how service is something that you might value. Yeah. That's you've got an obvious one.
It's a great
with the Bulldogs
quote. Yes, proud ambassador for the Western Bulldogs Community Foundation, as you are, Josh. Does some great work on mental health, physical health in Indigenous communities. Fantastic. So I love being part of that in a happily voluntary basis. And volunteering is something I've loved doing as a way of giving back. You mentioned I served on the Melbourne Press Club board, both as president and a board member for a long time, trying to improve the level of journalism in Melbourne and around the country and bolster excellence in journalism. I've been involved in being an assistant footy coach, a water runner, a gopher for my kids' sporting teams, son and daughter's footy teams over the years. I love that. I've always had a great volunteering ethos in every capacity, and it's something that it's been hard sometimes with the job I do and the hours I work, but it is something that I really derive a lot of pleasure from in that sense of giving back.
Yeah, beautiful. And Jez, this came to me earlier when you were talking about what gets people up in the morning, like what is that magic recipe? And I think service might have something to do with what you can give to others rather than what you can get from
And I think it's something that comes with age as well, when you kind of think about the question of legacy, which, as I've kind of advanced in my career and my life, I kind of think, what am I doing all this for apart from paying the bills, and what am I leaving behind? And it's a question that kind of sits more heavily with me now than it did even sort of 5-10 years ago. Same as Michael, volunteering is a great way of not only kind of having a sense of purpose, identifying a sense of purpose, but you also meet your people, right?
You do indeed. Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like that's a way of, so for me it's stuff in the gay community, the LGBT community, stuff around women's empowerment. So I've kind of broadly been involved in that sort of space in various ways. Very happy to kind of not be the front man for a lot of those things. So, kind of they're not necessarily high profile sort of roles, but often, that's our skill set, right? So, the thing that, when they're looking for someone to MC or help someone organize an event, like where do you start and all that kind of thing.
Call Jeremy Fernandez.
Yeah, well, they do. And I kind of like it. But, it is hard with the jobs that we do and getting the time. And there's also, for us managing any perception of bias is a tricky one to manage as well, and I'm very, very careful about that. There's a whole system at the ABC.
Yeah, but not when you're hosting Sydney Mardi Gras. That can be full of bias, though, can't it?
Well, this is the thing. Like, some people would consider that to be, a very political kind of statement or an act, to be kind of leaning into the joy in, at Mardi Gras time.
Isn't that just a
sometimes you can
celebration?
well, it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
But, we've got to be careful about that as well, because sometimes human rights can be very political for some people. So I kind of, and then you're talking about, kind of major sponsors who you're working with on, kind of volunteer projects, and whether that produces a perception of conflict of interest. So we have to kind of be very careful about that to make sure that we protect the integrity of what it is we do as well. But I agree. Volunteering is just such a joy-making exercise. It's so great, and you know that you've made an impact in a room because people are so grateful for this very simple act of service that you've been able to provide, and it leaves you with a good feeling. So and it leaves a sense of kind of having left a little trace of a legacy that helps someone else flourish and move on and do better things for other people as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I love it, and why I wanted to bring that question to you guys, because I know that you are very serviceable in your ways, and not just in the volunteering sense. I think you are in the way you work too. You guys really don't make it about you. It's very much about what you're giving to society or giving to the world. So I think I chose that because I felt like with my big projection lens on both of you, that I find you both very serviceable in your ways, and I think that's two beautiful qualities to have in both
Thanks,
of you.
Josh. No, we work in an industry of narcissists. I think that's fair to say. And I think we're both in the.
I love the giggles.
That's a choir.
Sometimes it's just a laugh in a college.
Mentally going through, him, her, yep.
And
you need therapy, you need therapy.
And I do too. And I don't think any industry is immune to narcissism.
Yeah.
And in my way have felt that I've been a narcissist too. And I think that's I chatted about it on various episodes of this show with different artists that come on, and that self-focused thing as an
there's
artist.
Productive narcissism, which you need to lean into, certainly for Josh Pitterman walking out as Phantom of the Opera in front of thousands of people. But there's also toxic narcissism, which is not good on any level.
Well, yeah, when I talked about like being an introvert and having the eyes on me, that when I discussed that with myself, I felt like that was only promoting the narcissist within me, that I made it about me and their eyes on me. When I flipped that about how can I serve the audience, then suddenly, and that took a while into my career, but when I went, it's not about me, it's about what I'm sharing with them, then the whole thing flipped on its head, and I haven't felt like that. But the mental side of being an artist is huge, as it would be for you guys. You have to be so mentally focused. Like it requires a lot. What tools do you guys have to stay sort of focused and present and clear within your mind? Because I can imagine there'd be a lot of thoughts floating about at times.
Coffee.
Lots
of coffee.
But doesn't that make you sort of jittery? No.
I find it's a performance enhancer for me. Not too much, but I'll need a couple of coffees at least before and during the show.
No meditation. Like, I'm not meditating. I'm going to get coffee.
No coffee. But going back to what I said earlier, physical exercise.
Okay.
And the benefits of which are still there for the next morning by going for a run or a swim, walking the dog, doing something makes me sleep better. So I wake up fresher, clearer of mind to tackle a 3-hour rolling news program, and similarly as a release after the show. But no, I don't meditate. I possibly like to move into that, and I've always thought I'd like to see the benefits of it up front, and perhaps we can speak about that off air, as we say. But no, I just try to stay as calm as possible. Put every other thought out of my mind while I'm on air, hard as though it is, and just stay as focused as I can. Sometimes it works.
You'd have to have a lot of routine. You're up so early, and like you'd have to be so disciplined
Yeah, there's
with
a lot of
that.
discipline
It's not
involved.
like an athlete. Like, do you have a clear routine?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's been a routine. It's a very antisocial, very boring routine. I'm in bed by 8 o'clock most nights. Asleep by 8:01, 8:02, depending.
Really?
Are you one of those people?
Really, you just go,
like you just
hit the pillow and you're gone.
Usually, yeah. Although if I'm back
That's
from
impressive.
leave or a few days off, it takes a few days or nights to get into the swing of things. But I describe working as a breakfast TV presenter as living in this constant world of semi-jet lag.
There we go, Jimmy set lag.
There you go,
Yeah.
right there. This low-level baseline exhaustion, not enough to prevent you sounding coherent on air and being at the top of your game, hopefully most mornings, but it's always there, so which means I usually get to sleep fairly easily at 8 o'clock. Alarm goes off just after 3. I've been pushing it forward and forward as the years go by, and then leap into it, shower, coffee, go into work, production meetings, on air, off air at 9 o'clock. We have post-match discussion. Some other things we need to do, then go home, and I'll try to do that at physical exercise, try to switch off as much as I can, in bed by 8, repeat process. So there is a lot of discipline involved in doing what I do.
Yeah. And what about you, Jez? What do you do
So-
to keep the mind focused?
I'm not a coffee drinker.
Really?
Yeah. So for me,
no coffee whatsoever?
no coffee. It makes me jittery.
Yep.
And that was because I had too much coffee when I was younger. So
Well,
just
I'm
the
going to act
slightest.
like I don't know this, but I did learn about this in one of the episodes. Of
Oh,
Not
really?
Stupid. Yep. And you don't, and tea?
No. For me, when I wake up in the morning, it's like a litre of water.
Yep.
Really?
Just flush myself out. Just kind of rehydrate, and then I find that kind of wakes me
Thank
up.
God
quite
you're not
well.
doing breakfast television. You'd be off there every second going for a piss.
I used to do the Australian Network stuff out of Melbourne,
Yes.
which was a 2:30 a.m. wake up, in the office by 3, and on air by 6 a.m. You got to get in and write news and sport and all that kind of thing. This was
It's
for
not
the-
glamorous, people.
No,
it's not
no.
glamorous.
Jez had a bucket under the desk to deal with a litre of water.
That's right. That's right. But that's what I do. And the other thing is exercise. For me, it's weightlifting. I know I don't really look it, but weightlifting I find is a form for me of
That's
meditation.
not a gay community thing?
No.
No,
There's no vanity, like really. It's just about keeping my joints intact, and
Yep.
it's for me. It's like a form of meditation because all I can think about when I'm lifting heavy is just don't drop this on your head.
Yep.
And I find that ultra focus is actually kind of takes me out of everything else and just to focus on the weights.
Yeah.
The danger of it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
you actually have to be focused because it's very easy to injure yourself when you're lifting, heavy
Yeah,
weights.
life-threatening stuff tends to do it. We've had people talk about rock climbing. We've had people talk about ice bathing and all sorts of sort of extreme things. But the weights can be
Yeah.
just as life-threatening. I've had stuff fall on me before.
It's not, and when you do yourself a little back injury or whatever, it's
I'm constantly getting things.
yeah. But I find it very helpful, and then I need to kind of tune out. As an introvert, I need to schedule in time by myself.
Solo time is so important. I agree.
I mean, some people recharge in the company of others. I'm not one of those people.
me
I
either.
need time on my own. I will put in earplugs and headphones. Sensory deprivation is a real thing. Like I don't kind of do those flotation kind of things, but
Have you ever done one?
no, I've never done one before. I've heard they're amazing,
Yeah,
but
got to get you a voucher.
I
Brayden, can we organise a voucher?
But I will. So I did a big show last night, and in the dressing room for a good hour beforehand, eye mask, earplugs, noise cancelling headphones, and I just need to tune out of absolutely everything. And then when it's showtime, I'm on. I'm kind of
So you find that really recharges you. That's you
yeah.
plugging Jez into the socket.
100%. Absolutely. And then when it was lights on, camera on, I'm energised and I'm ready to go.
So in the dressing room before the Sydney 7 o'clock news bulletin, we find Jez Fernandez.
What you'll find me is at my desk.
Yeah.
With earplugs in and headphones on.
Okay, right.
And I'll
That's how
keep
you-
an ear out, half an ear out for, kind of breaking stories and stuff. But especially the hour before, I'm kind of in my own head.
So interesting. You talked about, ailments that can happen in the gym. Michael, you and I share different versions of a similar ailment, and you've had something happen with your eye.
Yes.
And I also had something happen with my eye. And it was happening over a course of many years. My left eyelid started to droop and droop and droop. I think it's got something to do with my sinus on the left side. And I have been very quiet about it. I wasn't brave at all. But I saw how brave you were about it. Can you talk a little bit about the issue and how
Sure.
courageous you were in sharing it?
Oh, thanks, Josh. No, you might notice my right pupil is permanently dilated.
Oh, yes. I've seen you write about this before.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's not that I'm just going to ping I'm just going to take pingers, but just on my right side.
Yeah, no, it's not that. I can assure you it's not that. No, long story short, it's the result of a horrible accident that happened when I was 20 or so. I was driving in a car in Sydney. I'm a Sydney boy. At that stage, I was living in Sydney. Actually, thankfully, I wasn't driving, because if I was driving, I probably wouldn't be here to tell the story. I was in the passenger seat. It was a lovely summer's evening. One of my mates was driving the car. And along this stretch of road in Glebe, in inner Sydney, little idiots were on the side of the road with a slingshot, just taking shots at cars.
What?
Yep.
Good grief.
As Friday night entertainment. And one of those shots got me in the eye. It was a chestnut, like a small hard plant thing. Thankfully, it wasn't like a metal ball bearing or anything like that. Anyway, hit me with force. I can still recall feeling the dull shock, and the pain didn't come until a bit later, but still hearing the pellet just bouncing off my eye onto the closed window in the back. Long story short, again, the eye hemorrhaged. The intense pain followed. My mate drove me to the nearest hospital, and I went under the knife. The eye surgeon came that close to actually having to take the eye out, but he didn't. But as a result, it's disabled in the sense I can still see out of the right eye, but if I was just to look out of it, I'm seeing you through a gauzy look. With the other eye open, I'm pretty much okay. So I was incredibly self-conscious about it for so many years, so much so that in conversations with people, I'd subconsciously just bring my hand up to my face to cover the eye. It's taken me a lot of time to actually stop doing that. And presenting 3 hours of live TV every day with an unforgiving camera, obviously people would write in on a regular basis saying, gee, including eye surgeons saying, come and see me. I mean, there is something seriously wrong with your pupil.
I can get money out of this.
Yes. Well, and with out of the goodness of their heart, it's just a voicing concern. And I just ended up being open about it and saying it on air and writing a piece about it and how I deal with it. So it's in the scale of things that could happen to me or anybody. It's, I think, small scale, but it's something that it really had a great impact on my life for many years when I was younger.
Big enough for you to be self-conscious about it.
Yep.
And how did you feel after you wrote about it? We talk a lot on the show about celebrating our imperfections as an antidote to feeling embarrassed or shameful about it. Was that a big release?
It was a massive release. Yeah, great question. It was really, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulder. And by that stage, I wasn't really self-conscious about it. I wrote the piece and was public on air because I was getting a lot of correspondence. And mainly just thinking of the viewers, just to put them at ease, saying it wasn't something serious. No, I'm not at the early stages of having a stroke. It's nothing that serious. This is what happened. This is how I've dealt with it. And it certainly was a happy moment, if you can call that a happy moment, in being so public about it.
Well, good on you. You did, as I said, you're far braver than I was. I sort of sat with this thing that was just getting worse and worse over years, and then I just went and had surgery and then came out the other side, and it's still never going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. But I just, reading that with what you went through, I was just like, you know what? Going forward, I'm going to be much more open about my ailments when things go wrong. So when I had vocal surgery, I was like, you know what? I'm going to speak up about this because, what you went through inspired me, and that. So I want to know that you were a cause of inspiration there for coming out and talking about vocal surgery and breaking stigmas.
And props to you for leaning into your issue there too.
Yeah. So, guys, we're coming towards the end of our wonderful chat, and thank you so much for coming on. And what I want to know is, how your careers have helped you to understand the human condition and human beings, and what it's like to traverse and navigate our way through this thing that we call life.
That is such a big question.
I know, that's why I'm finishing with it.
Good God, how long have you got?
I'm not going to ask you the footy team after this. This is just
shamelessly handballing it to Jez to start with.
I think it is that piece about resilience, about how to kind of get up in the tough times and how to keep going. And increasingly for me, it's about how to make the world a better place for other people as well, which, kind of the news is one way of doing that. Even though the news is kind of really dark at times, I think the value of informing people cannot be underestimated. I am not in the business of persuading anyone of anything. I always say that about my job. Couldn't care less. I don't have the time or energy for it. But I do care about people being informed. And sometimes being informed means that you are more comfortable in the position you already held, and that's totally fine. And sometimes it's about changing minds. So I guess for me it's about learning about other people's resilience. It's also I think increasingly taking the license to select who you let into your life and what energy and what values you will and won't accept from the people around you. I've kind of, I think from the lessons I've learned on the job, discovered that some relationships and friendships I've outgrown and no longer serve me.
And probably you can no longer serve them in a way.
Exactly. And that's totally fine. It's not necessarily in a hostile kind of way, but being okay to walk away from things that no longer suit, but also finding purpose and where I can best fit into that, into the kind of great puzzle of life and, what other people need in this world. I think that's the great gift of being a journalist.
Beautiful. Hey, just on something you said, if you could change the news in one way, add something to it, get rid of something from a 30-minute bulletin.
I've thought about this.
Yeah, what would that be?
I would
know why
say
we're whispering. No
good
one's
evening.
listening in, except for everyone who's listening to the show.
Good evening, Jeremy Fernandez with ABC News. There was no news today. Good night.
Really?
I love it.
I would love that.
I would love that.
Honestly, I would love that. If I got put out of a job, I would be so thrilled.
Really?
I've thought about this, and that is what.
Not just going, we're going to have, as Sammy J and Celia Piccola wanted, news, sport, arts,
but that's
and weather.
Yes, we're fighting for that too.
Yeah,
yes.
To be honest, there are days when, there's always news, there's always stuff going on in Australia and around the world, but there are some days when there is no big news and not stories worthy of presenting to a wider audience.
And rather than fishing for crap, for clickbait,
exactly.
you're just coming on and saying there's news. I would
Have
love
a great
that.
day. Yeah.
And then also you get to finish work slightly earlier, so that's great.
I dare you to do that one night, Jez.
Do you know it has happened once at the BBC, BBC Radio, I think it like in the 50s or 60s or something like that. They just came on and said,
Today, there is no news. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Good night. Yeah.
I went to drama school. I didn't study broadcasting. What about you, Michael? To finish up, to close us.
As journalists, Jez and I are have incredibly privileged jobs. We get to meet and speak to people from all walks of life. From the Prime Minister, like for instance, we had the Prime Minister. I spoke to the Prime Minister on the show this morning, speaking to Prime Ministers or people on factory floors. And in my experience, that has enabled me to have much greater insights into the human condition in knowing that there are different layers to every personality. Everybody's different. No one's perfect. And I hope that I've brought those lessons to my wider life in terms of being more tolerant of people, knowing that no one's perfect. Everybody has their strengths and their faults. And just being a bit more accepting of people no matter who they are, where they come from and what they say. It sounds pretty simple, but it just comes from the wellspring of just being in this great job where we get to speak to literally everybody across every spectrum of society, and it's something I really value, and it's something that has given me strength over the years.
I think that's beautiful, and how wonderful would it be for so much of society just to step in your shoes for a day or two or a week and face all of that and then see the world through the lens that you've just expressed. I think that says a lot about your character, Michael, and equally I loved your answer. And I've loved this chat. Guys, thank you so much for coming on.
What a thrill.
Yeah, it's been beautiful.
Invitation. Where's the show tune? You promised us a show tune.
Oh, gosh, what? Oh, I can't, no, I'm not even going to try. No.
I am what I am.
No pressure, Jim.
So fun. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.